There, welcome back to Christian Friendly. In today's video, I'd like to teach you relative clause. Whether you do an IELTS test or PTE test or TOEFL, or whether you are preparing for advanced English course, you'll need to show in your speaking and writing tests that you are able to use complex sentence structures of the English language. And relative clause, which is a type of subordinate clause, helps you to form complex sentences because in your speaking and writing, where your grammar and vocabulary is assessed, if you show a wide range of sentence structures, you're likely to get a higher band score. In other words, the wider range of complex sentence structures that you can use, the better impression it makes on the examiner and the higher score that you're likely to get. So in today's video, I'd like to teach what a relative clause is and what different types of relative clause that we can use in our speaking and writing tests. So let's get started without any further ado. Well, a relative clause is a small group of words that contain at least one subject and one predicate or verb in it. A relative clause is formed beginning with relative pronouns such as that, which, where, whom, and who. So there are three types of relative clause. There are two basic types of relative clause. One is defining, and the next one is non-defining relative clause. And the next one is sentential relative clause. So a defining relative clause defines which person, place, thing is meant. For example, if you say, my sister who lives in Canada is an engineer. In this sentence, who lives in Canada is an example of a defining relative clause because it defines which sister of mine. Because it shows, the sentence shows that I have many sisters, but I'm talking about the one who lives in Canada. I'm not talking about the sister who lives in India, who lives in the UK. I'm talking about the one who lives in Canada. So who lives in Canada is a relative clause because it begins with who, relative pronoun, and it defines which sister of mine. So this is an example of a defining relative clause because it defines which sister of mine. And in a defining relative clause, if you remove the relative clause, the sentence doesn't make sense. For example, if you say, my sister is an engineer, but which sister of mine? It doesn't make sense. But there is another type of relative clause, which is called non-defining relative clause, because it does not define which person, place, thing is meant. Because there is only one, and this is obvious. And the main function of relative clause in non-defining relative clause is to give extra information about the person, the thing being described. For example, if you say, my sister who lives in Canada is a nurse with commas in them, it means I have only one sister, and who lives in Canada is extra information about my sister. And even if I omit this relative clause, the sentence still makes sense. Here, the main function of relative clause is not to define which sister is meant, but to give extra information about my sister. And there is another type of relative clause, which is called sentential relative clause, which is a type of non-defining relative clause. It does not define any person, place, or thing, but it describes the whole sentence. It modifies the whole sentence, in fact. For example, if you say, Tina passed her exam with flying colors, a sentence, a short sentence. But if you use a relative clause, you can say it this way. Tina passed her exam with flying colors, which comes as no surprise. Which comes as no surprise is an example of a sentential relative clause because it does not modify Tina. It does not modify any place, but it modifies the whole sentence, which is Tina passed her exam with flying colors. So, I explained 3 types of relative clause: defining relative clause, non-defining relative clause, and sentential relative clause. And if you want to know more about relative clauses, please do feel free to ask me questions in the comment sections below. We'll see with the next video. Until then, take care of yourself and your family. Good luck.